Work it, Lori.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are live.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of June 15th, 2022. As always, I'd like to acknowledge our meeting today on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples. And now let's turn to the first item on the agenda, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 1 is approval of the agenda. There are 2 new business items. Item NB1 is correspondence, which is supplemental to information to item R2. And new business item number 2 is closed session report number 2 regarding law enforcement in accordance with section 90, subsection 1F of the community charter.
Okay, thank you very much. So could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So the next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is adoption of the minutes, and the recommendation before you is that the minutes of the Electoral Area Service Committee meeting of June 1st, 2022 be adopted.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any comments? So go ahead, Director Morrison.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to raise the question in a meeting in that we had an item in our last meeting that was, I guess it was R4, and it was the telecommunications tower application. And there's been a little bit of discussion back and forth as to the appropriateness of this being in the Electoral Area Services Committee versus perhaps Committee of the Whole. And I haven't heard anything that's definitive that makes it clear that it would be either here or there. I tend to think that it was in the right place at Electoral Area Services. So I would just ask if we can get some clarity from staff at our next meeting as to when future ones of these come forward, where they will be going and who will be actually allowed to vote on them at the board. Thank you.
Okay, so noted. Thank you. Any other comments on the agenda or the adoption or the minutes? Sorry. Seeing none, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item is public input period. We have no applicants.
Okay, thank you. Next item
would be correspondence. Item C1 is a grant and aid request from Electoral Area A, and the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area A, Mill Bay Malahat, in the amount of $500 be provided to the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce to support the year-round visitor servicing operations of the Cowichan Regional Visitor Center.
Thank you. That's been moved. We have a seconder. Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is a grant and aid request from Electoral Area C. And the recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that a grant and aid Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill, in the amount of $200 be provided to the Duncan Cowichan Chamber of Commerce to support the year-round visitor servicing operations of the Cowichan Regional Visitor Center.
Okay, thank you. That's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is information. There are 3 items of information. Number 1 is on Electoral Area A, Mill Bay Malahat Advisory Planning Commission minutes of June 2nd, 2022. The second is Electoral Area A, Mill Bay Malahat Advisory Planning Commission PM minutes of June June 2nd, 2022. And item 3 is Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake Advisory Planning Commission minutes of June 2nd, 2022. And all 3 items are for information.
Okay, I see Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I think I've raised this issue before, but I found Electoral Area B APC minutes not very informative. And I really feel that if we ask our commission for advice on applications, it would be helpful not to just get a recommend approval, recommend not approval, but to understand what they considered in their recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if we have any comment on that from staff or whether we'll just take that under advisement. Director Acton.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good point. I did attend that APC meeting, and it kind of came up. They wondered if they should write more than that, and then they decided, well, Sierra's here, so she'll pass it on. But I can let them know that the rest of the committee would appreciate a little more detail.
Okay, thank you. I see Ms. Charoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So APCs previously have been advised that it is possible for them when they're stating their recommendations to the committee that they can include some bullet points to clarify their or validate their recommendation. And so we can certainly remind them of that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good to know. Okay, thank you. So,
Mr. Chair,
go ahead, Director Acton.
since we're talking about the APCs, could I ask really quickly if there's going to be anything coming forward on APCs meeting in public, or like having meetings in person? I know that as volunteers, they really value that, because that is one of the reasons why they end up volunteering, is to meet other people in the community. So, and I know they're anxious to do that. So will we be having an update on that soon?
Okay, Ms. Charoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe that the Community Planning Division will be bringing a report forward with some options around in-person versus hybrid commission meetings. I think that a combination of those is happening now, with some commissions continuing to prefer to meet electronically and others preferring to meet in person, but we can certainly try to advance that report so it comes to you soon. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further questions on the APCs? Seeing none, so that was for information. So we'll move on now. Ms. Saracen, the next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is reports, and item R1 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding Yubo Bar and Grill located at 10524 Yubo Road. It's a liquor license, liquor primary structural change with regard to capacity increase. There is a recommendation before you, and the applicant, Lauren Ablainda, is in the lobby. I can admit her.
Okay, thank you. And I see Jamie has joined us too. Okay, welcome, Ms. Ablanida.
Yes,
Welcome.
thank you.
Okay, and I see Ms. Gabinia, you're with us as well?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Looks like you have a report to go through with us. If you'd like to go ahead, that'll be fine.
Sure. Thank you. So through the chair. So this is an LCRB liquor license application for a structural change to increase capacity by 36 persons at the Yubo Bar and Grill in Area I. The patio area was previously used as part of a food primary license, so there's no new construction proposed. However, CBRD building inspection will need to review and stamp the occupant load prior to the LCRB approving the license. The lot is zoned for, or zoned neighborhood pub commercial, C5, in the area I bylaw, which permits the pub so long as it's licensed under provincial regulations. And staff have recommended opting out in order for the LCRB to proceed their community input and comment process.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for staff? There we go. Okay, I see Director Nicholson and then Director Kuhn.
Well, this is just a general question. I'm remembering that we looked at one for, I think, Area B, and were staff going to report back to us on what the liquor control people do as far as community consultation goes? Or maybe they could clarify that for me. Thank you.
Would like to take that one.
I can take it.
Okay.
Or General Manager and Cheryl if you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm not able to tell you exactly what it is they do. It is their responsibility if the CVRD opts out of consultation that it is their responsibility to do that. What they do is sort of up to them. It's not written specifically into the regulations. So presumably they've got some policy around that. If there's a board resolution directing staff to investigate that and report back, we can do that.
Okay, follow up, Director Nicholson?
Okay, so I guess my point was I thought there was a resolution that staff do that, and I was wondering where it was at. But if there isn't a resolution, I would like to make that after we deal with this application. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Cheryl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My memory is foggy, but I do recall having this conversation previously, and we may have talked about the Development Services Modernization Project addressing how that consultation takes place. But and so perhaps we can ask the Development Services staff who are involved with that project to report back on that particular item as it relates to development application process.
Okay, thank you. Okay, turn to Director Kuhn.
I would like to move the resolution as presented by staff. And I did myself a drive around. I went to all the immediate neighbors day before yesterday. And I asked them, and I was primarily concerned about two older ladies that lived there. And both of them confirmed to me that, yes, there was a wedding just recently and they had music going till 12:30 at night. It was a bit loud, but it wasn't annoying them too much. So there was no big concern about that so-called expansion. So I moved the resolution.
Okay, and that was has been seconded by Director Wilson. Maybe I'll just invite the applicant. Ms. Ablanita, did you want to add anything at this point? Sorry, I think you're muted. We're still having trouble hearing you. Sorry.
Okay, how is that?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously we are really hoping that this request is approved. It will help our business, obviously. So from what I am hearing, it looks like that you are in the process of approving our application, and I'm happy to know that it will be approved.
Okay, we haven't decided yet.
I know. Obviously, we are looking forward to that. It will really be helpful.
Okay, any further discussion or questions for either staff or the applicant? Okay, seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ippolita. And I see Director Morrison wants to add something.
Well, it's along the lines of making efficient use of our staff's time, and I believe we've done this in years gone past, and think it might be appropriate, as opposed to having our staff write a report in excess of what they're already doing. Wouldn't it be appropriate to invite the liquor and cannabis regulation branch representatives to come and present to committee so that we can hear what their process is and ask questions and get a better understanding of what their process is when we make decisions like we have just done?
Okay, that's a question for staff, I think, and maybe Ms. Charles.
Tell you what, why don't I just move that recommendation that the liquor and cannabis control branch be invited to attend a future electoral area services committee meeting.
Okay, that was moved and seconded, and Ms. Charles, you had you. And I see Director Kuhn, I see. Maybe we'll just after Ms. Charles.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that you weren't asking them to be present at every single meeting where you were considering a liquor branch application. We could certainly look at including these folks as part of the regular board orientation process. That would be an option.
Okay, thank you. Director Kuhn?
Yeah, I fail to see what great concern we have here. I just hate to see this getting more and more complicated, and we seem to be doing that over and over and over. We make it more complicated. We want more rules, more regulations. This is a fairly straightforward thing. I mean, we've decided on it, but I can't see where were there other big problems that we had to deal with that we now have to call the Liquor Control Board to have a special session. We've got enough work to do, and staff have enough work to do. So I would just do away with that. Thank you.
Okay, so I think several comments. Director, can I saw you first? Did you have comments? No? Okay. Go ahead then, Director Morrison.
I think Director Kuhn may have misunderstood me. I'm not asking that they be invited as part of any application. I'm asking that they be invited so that we can understand their process better and that we don't have to have staff write a report on their process. Just an invitation sometime in the next 6 months would be wonderful, and if they could attend even virtually so that we can ask any questions we might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Kuhn.
Well, I had questions, and I had a discussion with Anne yesterday or day before yesterday regarding this application and the process of the LCB. And she explained to me how it worked, and it was very simple. And I can't see any reason why we should have to have a session to clarify. I think the rules are pretty straightforward, and Anne explained them to me, and I thought, yeah, that's pretty good. Thank you very much. And so let's leave it at that. Let's not have more digging more into it. It's good enough as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Any further comments? Seeing none, there is a motion on the floor. I'd like to call the question on that one, please. All in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed. Motion carries. Great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Ablanita.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.
Okay, the next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is R2, which is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number DVP 22G01 in relation to 3702 South Oyster School Road, PID 003943551. And the applicant, Jane Barton-Gregg, nope, sorry, Mason Dernbach is in the lobby, and I'll just admit him.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Well, welcome, Mr. Dernbach.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good. Okay, so I think Ms. Suderman, you're going to give us a presentation.
I'm sorry, you're quite broken. I didn't catch that.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying addressing Ms. Suderman, the planner. I think we have a presentation on this one first.
Okay.
No, through the chair. This is Stefan Cermak, the manager. Bev is not available today, so I will be handling that. And I think I just killed your slide. Am I correct?
Yes.
It seemed like I couldn't do the two at the same time. So I'm going to try to get the slide going again. So forgive me if I have a hard time with the slide and a presentation at the same time. Give me one
No
moment,
worries.
please. Thanks.
Lynn, you have a comment? You're muted, Lynn.
Just wanted to be on the list.
Oh, I see. Okay. I think you're the top of the list.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm ready to go, I think.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Mr. Cermak.
Excellent. So the purpose of this report is to introduce a development variance application regarding the subject address at South Oyster Street Road. It's a simple one to vary the rear parcel line setback requirement from 4.5 meters to 1 meter for the construction of a new accessory building. The subject property is a developed residential parcel located on the south side of South Oyster School Road in an established residential neighborhood made up of modest single-family dwellings. The parcel is rectangular in shape, approximately 733 meters squared in area, and it has a gentle slope. The applicant wishes to build a 16 by 20 foot accessory building in the rear yard to store various things like lawnmowers, personal pleasure, bicycles. Because of the slope of the yard and the retaining wall that has been built bisecting the rear yard to create a flat area for the house, this limits the available area where such an accessory building can go. A couple images for you. Well, first, the property is zoned R3 in the Area G zoning bylaw. The only principal use permitted in the zone is single-family dwelling. And for accessory residential uses, the applicable setbacks are for the interior side parcel line, 1 meter if the building is located in a rear yard, and rear parcel line is 4.5 meters. And the images can show you where the existing structure is to be torn down and replaced with a larger accessory building. You can see the lot lines there. Let's see, the distance between the property line and the retaining wall is approximately 10 meters. The 4.5 meter yard, 4.5 meter rear yard setback essentially halves the usable rear yard area, which I already said. And you can see a couple different images there, placing it in context. And you can see the existing shed on your left there to be removed with the view of the neighbor's house at the back. In a moment, I will tell you that that's the corresponding letter that you got regarding the neighbor who's okay with the, or who supports the application. So here's more of a layout. You can see on the bottom left corner is where that picture of that shed to be removed is and where the new accessory building is proposed to be built. And on this lot, you can see where it says on the bottom right, number 1, it says plan, what does it say, 18425. That again is the adjacent neighbor who wrote a letter of support. A total of 43 letters were mailed out or hand delivered to property owners and within 100 meters, and that we only got the 1 correspondence back from the immediate adjacent neighbor. And it's recommended by staff that the board issue the DVP.
Very good. So thank you. So I'll turn to questions for staff. I think Director Smith is first on the list.
Thank you very much. I do not have any questions for the staff. This is a very straightforward. I appreciate all the applicants' work in checking with the neighbors, and I'd like to move the recommendation.
Okay, was that seconding? Good, okay. Now I saw Director Nicholson and then Yanni DiNardo.
I had a process question, so maybe I could wait till afterwards.
Okay, Director Yanni DiNardo? No? Okay, I was just seconding. All right, before we vote, I'll just turn to Mr. Dernbach. Did you have anything to add at this point?
No, I don't think so. I think it's been pretty straightforward. I think I think you can kind of see the limitations with this lot. So yeah, it'd be good to get it and just kind of get on with my plans here. So hopefully that can take place.
Okay, very good. So seeing no further discussion, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Dernbach.
Yep, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Anything further from me, or is that it?
No, that's it. That's you're good to go.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
So, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. What I'm wondering, it appears to me that this report was written before the deadline for letters to come back from the community providing their input. And I guess my question is, do staff make recommendations independent of community input? Because I sort of was surprised.
Mr. Cermak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, maybe Ms. Charoff would like to answer first? No? Okay. The answer is both. Yes, staff do the analysis. We look at the OCP and good planning. We provide analysis there. And we write the report from that perspective. And if the feedback comes back that is opposed to that or is contrary to that, then that'll be reflected in the report and in turn be communicated to the committee and the board. Does that help answer your question?
Dr. Nicholson?
So that answers my question, except in this particular case, it was already on the agenda before any input had come in from the community with, the report had already been published. So yeah, I find that I don't think that is in the best interest of the community to do that.
Okay, I think Ms. Charoff has a comment.
So the notification letters are required to be sent out at least 10 days prior to the board meeting to consider the variance application. Our practice is actually to get the letters out at least 10 days prior to the committee meeting so that folks have enough time to provide comments if they would like to. We don't always have all the comments back from neighbors in advance of finalizing the staff report because of our agenda deadlines, our publishing deadlines. And so staff make recommendations based on the best information they have as planners. And so in making their decisions, they're looking at the regulations, they're looking at policy, they're looking at planning best practices, and they will consider what community comments have been received if they've been received. And so that's what's formulating the recommendation to the committee. If additional comments come in following completion of the report, those can be provided to the committee verbally or in writing prior to the committee meeting to consider the report, or even prior to the board meeting to consider the committee's recommendation. So we do the best we can with the information that we have at the time, but it is just one piece of the overall sort of set of information that we're looking at when we're creating those recommendations for you.
Okay, go ahead, Director Nicholson.
Well, I actually, I'm not in favor of that process. I would like the input. And so I guess my question is, or maybe it's not a question, maybe it's a comment. I would hope that if this carries on this way, that in the report, it is clear when the deadline for people getting their submissions in is, so that so we can understand if people have responded in a timely way or not. Because it just, what if applications come in what if comments come in afterwards? It seems, I don't know, doesn't seem very transparent.
Go ahead, Ms. Charoff.
So we do, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do in the notification or the notice letter that goes out, we're pretty clear on the process and how comments can be provided. And as I said, if those comments are received in advance, they can be factored, and sometimes if the comments come in advance and they're negative in nature, they may be comments that the applicant wishes to try to address, and that can sometimes lead to delay in the processing of the application. But ultimately, we're kind of dealing with trying to balance, right, the concerns of adjacent property owners with the applicant's desire to advance their application, so ultimately they can get to building stage, right? It's all a balance.
Okay, yes, thank you. Hopefully that helps, Director Nicholson. I'll just note we typically have late submissions right up to the day of an application being considered, and as part of the process. So, seeing no further discussion on that, we'll move to the next item, please. Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item R3, which is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number RZ21C01 for 3570 Telegraph Road, PID 010427171. And this was referred from the May 11th, 2022 board meeting. The applicant, Jane Barton-Gregg, is in the lobby, and I'll just admit her.
Okay, thank you. And welcome, Ms. Boyle, as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I believe you are all familiar with this application already, but I'll just summarize it again. Maybe we can move to the next slide. The property is located in Cobble Hill off of Telegraph Road, east of the Trans-Canada Highway, immediately across from Arbutus Ridge Golf Course. The property is approximately 2 hectares in size and is currently zoned RR2, Rural Residential 2 zone. And the land use designation is residential within the OCP and rural residential within the local area plan. The property was historically used as a turkey farm, but for the past 15 years, the owner of the property has been offering 2 long-term rentals and 4 short-term rentals, in addition to using the property as a primary place of residence. So the current use of the property does not comply with the zoning bylaw. Maybe we can move to the next slide. So the proposed development application consists of an amendment to the zoning bylaw to rezone the property from RR2 rural residential zone to a new site-specific comprehensive development zone. The applicant is proposing a single-family dwelling with an attached secondary suite, as well as a detached accessory dwelling unit, all 3 used for residential purposes. The applicant also proposes temporary tourist accommodation as a principal use with a maximum of 4 tourist sleeping units. 3 of these units would be located within the single family dwelling and 1 would be in a separate building on the property. So in summary, 3 dwelling units for long-term residential use and 4 tourist sleeping units for short-term accommodation. No further construction on the property is proposed, so there'll be no new buildings, no new development of impervious surfaces. All renovations will take place within the existing buildings and will be done to meet current BC building code standards. Upgrades to the existing servicing on the property are required as well to meet provincial regulations. So an amendment to the OCP for the electoral areas is also required, as the current use exceeds residential use policies in a residential land use designation. The land use designation of tourist commercial would encompass all the activities on the property. Maybe we can move to the next slide. So while an OCP amendment is proposed, staff are of the opinion that the rezoning application does meet the overall intention of the OCP and is suitable for a new site-specific comprehensive development zone. The application meets the goals of expanding tourism opportunities while keeping the rural character and heritage of the area and preserving environmentally significant characteristics of the property. The site-specific zone also includes special regulations to ensure the property retains the existing rural character. So I might not read out the recommendation, but I'm sure you have it all in front of you.
Okay, thank you very much. So if you could lower your screen there, I'll just just before I go to questions for staff, I'd like to welcome the applicant, Ms. Barton-Gregg and company. And any questions for staff? I think we're quite familiar with this one. I see Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just refreshing my memory on the last bullet for the recommendation around Water Sustainability Act. Can you remind me about what that was about?
Okay.
Sure. Through Director Martman, through the chair. So because the current use on the property is using a well and is exceeding what is customarily residential use on a property, it does need a water license under the Water Sustainability Act because it falls under a commercial water use.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for staff? Maybe I'll, seeing none, I'll invite the applicant if you'd like to say anything at this point. I'm sorry, you're on mute.
To say thank you to everyone. I have applied for the well license.
Good, okay. Thank you. So, I see Director Wilson, did you have a suggestion?
Yeah, no questions, Mr. Chair, and I would like to move option 1, and if I have a seconder, I can speak on it.
Okay, that's been seconded, so go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have had, well, first of all, a very, very big thank you to Ms. Boyle and for the whole planning department. This has been going on for some considerable time, and they put in a huge amount of work, and it is probably the most elegant solution that we can come up with, that they can come up with in consultation with Ms. Barton-Gregg. And I have had some conversations. They are happy with option 1, so I'm fully in favor of option 1. Thank you.
Excellent. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd like to call up. Go ahead, Director Smith.
So my understanding is this is a new zone that's being created specifically for this parcel. Is there any other parcels in Area C that might end up qualifying for this type of zoning? You know, once we put in a zone, then you set a precedent, and I'm just wanting to make sure to check on that to see if there's other possibilities with that. Thank you.
Who would like to take that? Well, looks like Director Wilson might know. Okay.
There's Ms. Jaroff as well, and she'll probably correct me if I'm wrong, but and Ms. Boyle as well. Reading through the report, this is site specific to this one site only.
Right. In agreement, Ms. Jaroff?
Yes, it is a site-specific zone, and yes, there may be other operators out there who might be interested in this type of zoning, and if they want to take advantage of it, they'd have to go through the regular CVRD process to do so. So every application's considered on a case-by-case basis on its own merits.
Okay, thank you. Great. So I was going to call the question. Should we read the option 1, Ms. Harrison, just to be clear?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board, number 1, that the official community plan and zoning amendment bylaws for application number RZ21C01, 3570 Telegraph Road, PID 010427171, be forwarded to the board for consideration of first and second reading. Number 2, that a public hearing be scheduled for application number RZ21C01, 3570 Telegraph Road, PID 010427171, with directors from electoral areas A, B, and C as delegates. Number 3, that the referrals for application number RZ21C01, 3570 Telegraph Road, PID 010427171 be accepted. Number 4, that a restrictive covenant be registered to prohibit subdivision, to protect a vegetated landscape buffer, to restrict an increase in dwellings, and to restrict an increase in tourist accommodation units. And number 5, that prior to consideration of adoption of official community plan and zoning amendment bylaws for application number RZ21C01, 3570 Telegraph Road, PID 010427171, the applicant be required to provide the CVRD with a copy of the authorization from the province of BC for the proposed use in accordance with the Water Sustainability Act.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harrison. So let's call the question on those, please. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you to the applicants.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome. All right, we'll move to the next item then, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item R4, which is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number RZ19I01, Laketown Ranch covenants and other legal agreements, and this is for information.
Okay. And it's probably Mr. Cermak again.
It is I. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll make this somewhat simple. You are all familiar with this application. What you have before you is for information. In addition to the OCP and zoning bylaw amendments that have received a lot of attention to date, there are a number of other legal agreements or arrangements that will be required to finalize the proposed Laketown Ranch development. Bylaw 4429, which amended the OCP, and bylaw 4430, which amended the zoning bylaw, were both given first and second reading by the board on June 8th. The OCP and zoning amendment bylaws require a public hearing before third reading, and a public hearing was scheduled for June 27th, but the date has been postponed for a couple of weeks to ensure staff have time to address a few outstanding questions about referral responses. I do believe they've been addressed, and so when Ms. Suderman returns from her week off, she will help schedule the next public hearing and ensure we meet the proper timelines. A housing agreement bylaw does not require a public hearing, but to take effect, housing agreements do require a bylaw. So that's what we call an administrative bylaw. And this bylaw will come forward to the CVRD board for adoption at the same time as final adoptions of the two previously mentioned bylaws. Yeah, in regards to covenants, there's a number of covenants that have been drafted with regard to no age restrictions, water and sewer servicing, and nuisances. These are attached to your report for your information. They are currently under legal review by the CVRD's legal counsel. Some changes in wording may result from this review, but honestly, Ms. Suderman did a fantastic job of drafting that and getting it to the legal team. The Habitat for Humanity covenant has not yet been drafted, but the intent is captured in the draft housing agreement. There is one more covenant for discussion. It'll be drafted to address the concern about public access to the site for use of the proposed dog park, existing trails, and pool. And because this item came up at a recent EASC meeting, the draft covenant has not yet been developed. However, it is anticipated to be ready soon. And in regards to a housing agreement, I'm going to get to the punchline. I'm learning that this is your first housing agreement in the CVRD. Congratulations. My previous work, I've done plenty of these, so that's a big step. So a housing agreement is a contract that is entered into voluntarily by a purchaser or a property owner with the local government. It's often a condition of rezoning or sale of land by the local government to an owner developer. And quite often these days, it is a very common amenity in order to get increased density. A housing agreement and any amendments to it must be entered into by bylaw, and the local government must file notice at the land title office. Once the notice is filed, the housing agreements become legally binding on future owners of the land, and legal notation of the agreement will appear on title of the respective property. However, the actual agreement will not be registered as a charge on the title to the property, and if a person is doing a land title search, wanted to view the agreement, they would have to contact the local government to obtain a copy. I hope that makes sense. Many local governments register the housing agreement as a Section 219 covenant, otherwise known as a restrictive covenant, which shows up as a charge on the land's title, and a copy can then be obtained from the land title office. This practice ensures that the future purchasers are aware of the agreements on the land, and this is the process that we are suggesting to follow in this particular case. Oh, boom, and there it is. There's the end of the notes and that were given to me by Ms. Suderman. I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Very good, thank you. So there we go. Any questions for Mr. Cermak? Director Martman, Yanni DiNardo, and Nicholson. Martman.
Well, thanks, Chair, and thank you for the report. And I'm interested because this is a real learning opportunity for me. And so the question I have is probably pretty basic, and I apologize for others that know this, but how do you enforce a covenant?
Oh, good question. So covenants are challenging to enforce to some degree. It requires I guess it's kind of complaint based like other. Well, let's put it this way: there's no requirement to enforce a covenant. However, it's an agreement that if enforcement is necessary, there's mechanisms in the covenant to do so. And so how do you do that? It depends on the mechanism that's worded in the covenant itself. In these circumstances, it could be based, all kinds of different ways can happen. It can be complaint based, or we could have a proactive way of doing it. I'd have to review the covenant to see what the actual mechanisms in the covenant say for this particular example. But basically, the agreement should spell out enforcement itself.
Follow up?
Thanks. I think it helps. So I think the devil's in the details, maybe you're saying.
Fair enough.
And the second one is, and in terms of non-compliance, if a person just goes, so I don't really care.
Yeah, that's again, it's a legal agreement. So the mechanism in there is generally, in my experience with the covenants, are you sit down, you talk to people, you try to resolve it. If you can't, there should be an arbitration agreement whereby you have so many days to address it, and if not, then the board can follow up with legal action. So the mechanism again should be spelled out quite clearly in there.
So we should be watching for the. Sorry, Chair, want to follow up if I can?
Yeah.
So we should be watching for that type of language going forward in these from you or from the CBRD?
It should have some mechanism of dispute resolution, and enforcement is a voluntary action by the parties. And again, that should be spelled out. Generally, it's like a written warning within so many days. And then if you don't comply, the next step should be laid out. That may be taken.
Okay.
But basically, CVRD will be in charge of that process if they choose to enforce.
Okay. I think Ms. Charles wanted to add something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do rely on our corporate solicitor for their good legal advice and for them to ensure that the covenants are well drafted and enforceable. So it's not, your responsibility to read those with a view to their legal correctness. They should be legally correct when you receive them.
Thank you. Okay, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, I wanted to follow up. Actually, the public access and is voluntary, and there will be a covenant. I was really happy to see that. So that means the owner will be responsible for the insurance and the maintenance, or however that's going to be worded. And also that the public will have use of the parks and trails, except for, of course, the 15 days they will have their festivals. I was really happy to see that, and I look forward to seeing that agreement as well, the covenant. But I'm curious about the sewer and water. Does CVRD take it over?
That's my understanding, is that that's an option in the future that the CVRD can do so. But perhaps Ms. Charoff would like to chime in on that one too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there is provision in the amendment bylaws to allow the community water and sewer systems to be owned and operated by the developer in this case, and that has happened. It's usually the CVRD that's named in the definition of community water, community sewer, but in this case, there's provision that's being made to allow the applicant and owner to do that. And I see Mr. Dennison has joined us, and so he's no longer has the title of Manager of Engineering, but he may have some words to share.
Mr. Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that's essentially it. The idea here was that they were going with a very, very simplified system in order to keep costs way down, to make it affordable for people. So there's a number of elements in this proposal that's unusual. And between ourselves and planning staff, we thought that we'd be willing to play ball and see what they do and if they meet these expectations. But it will be written into the covenant that they can't transfer it off to another private entity without the CVRD having first option to take on the system. Also, all the engineering work and everything has to be approved by us before it gets built. So we can assure standards are being met, and in future it wouldn't just go off to other owners that would run it into the ground kind of idea. So we think it's an interesting and perhaps beneficial approach on this one.
Thank you. Thank you. It was just a bit unusual. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I would like Mr. Cermak, if you wouldn't mind doing so, to clarify how the nuisance covenant works.
Thank you, through the chair. The nuisance covenant is basically an agreement that for anybody who is going to be living on the land, taking one of the residences, that they're aware that there's events on the property and there's basically no surprises. And so we put that on title, it lets them know that there's an event, and that it's similar to what you would see with edge planning for agricultural land uses, whereby if your neighbor is spreading fresh manure, there's no surprise that they're going to do that, and you won't complain and say, surprise. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Follow up?
Well, just to follow up. So I get that. I understand the awareness part. If an issue arises with respect to cannabis growing operations, for example, where the smell is beyond what one would expect, the covenant says that they are not allowed to complain to the CVRD. And it seems to me that sometimes industrial use, or maybe the music festival noises are louder than they're supposed to be. I don't understand how that works when they go beyond what would be acceptable.
Okay, Mr. Cermak.
Through the chair. Thank you. I think that's the same as any other agreement. If there's any question regarding breaking the conditions of that, you would address the parties and we could do an investigation. I'm sorry, are you not hearing me? Yeah, it's not surprising. This is a terrible headset. So, long story short, they can call, say you're an owner and you want to lodge a complaint, you can still do so through the parties of the agreement, and there can be an investigation to look into it. And that you don't lose that right to investigate a nuisance. All it is a heads up awareness saying that if the investigation reveals that the nuisance is as expected, that you were sort of forewarned.
Okay, well, one more follow-up.
Well, then I don't understand why then it says for greater certainty will not make any complaint to the CVRD in respect thereof.
I can't speak to, sorry, through the chair. I can't speak to that too much in the sense that if it's in excess of what the agreement is, then of course you can complain. And there would be no problem for us to look into the issue. It's just, I guess what you're committing to is if as a homeowner, you're consenting to not complain if it's within the expected parameters. And if you don't know, you can call.
Okay, should we go to Director? I'll go back. Director Morrison's next, and then we'll come back to you for further discussion. Director Morrison.
Thank you. 2 points, and I think the tour that directors were able to take there made it clear that I think the nuisance covenant is more of a comfort document than it is something that will be, practically exercised on a regular basis. Just knowing the area that there have been people living next to a gravel operation, a lot closer to residential areas than this. And I think this is one of those documents where, someone perhaps buying a property sight unseen is going to be made aware of the fact that they're next door to a music festival site, because they will be made aware when they're sitting with their lawyer doing conveyancing, or when they're next to an industrial facility. And, there's a lot of people like to live near their work, and that's a planning principle that we see quite often, where people want to be located relatively close to their place of employment. So I look at this as more of a comfort document than it is something that will be exercised on a regular basis. But I did have a question for Mr. Dennison, because I think that when we enter into agreements like this where we approve the engineering, and that's great, and they should be built to the standards that we would expect a system that we would be taking over. But we have, through experience, seen systems that were supposed to be built to a certain standard, but have had the installation not quite meet the standards of what were specified in the original drawing. So is there a way that we can ensure that the materials being used and that the ultimate build out of these sewer and water systems are going to be as specified in the engineered drawings that we approve?
Mr. Dennison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we actually have the right for inspections as it goes along the way and whatnot to make sure it's properly built. One would hope that the others of my profession would ensure that standards are being met. They're supposed to be doing that, but nevertheless, we do have the right for inspections as it's being built.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. Just briefly, I just have myself on the list before Director Nicholson, but these housing agreements are interesting. So can they be applied, we have after rezoning as well? I'm thinking of cases where there's been rezonings where they have X number of affordable or X number of rental. Is it now sort of the standard that we would think, okay, we'll ask for a housing agreement to sort of ensure these conditions?
Well, through the chair, it's difficult. It's a voluntary agreement. So it generally follows a process, and that process is generally through rezoning. So I'm not sure after the fact. I know it's an industry standard, so you'll have BC Housing especially using housing agreements as you would places like Habitat for Humanity and other societies that try to build affordable housing. So I'm not sure if you have an example where you'd apply it after the fact, but it certainly is feasible, and staff would recommend the same pattern of using a housing agreement bylaw, which contains a covenant within it to be registered on the title.
Okay, yeah, that helps. Thank you. Director Nicholson, did you have anything else?
No, it's okay. The report says that these are under legal review, so I'm hoping that staff will ensure that it doesn't preclude people from complaining when the nuisance is truly beyond nuisance.
Okay. Good. Any further questions or discussion? Director Smith.
Thank you. So one of the things that I've noticed is we've had engineering staff working on the wastewater system and the wastewater system here, and there is no way of capturing funding from the applicant for that work. And this has not been a small feat on the shoulders of the staff. It's taken away from the actual systems that are already under the CVRD, and I'm not sure that we're moving in a good direction when we are not capturing some sort of fee or part of the application if it includes something like this. And so I'm not sure how we address this, but we saw that just recently with a situation in Shawnigan Lake, and now we have this one, and they're beyond just a quick look and moving on. So I'm not sure if someone can advise us how we should start capturing some sort of funding.
Okay. Don't see a volunteer with Mr. Elf. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the cost of processing an application can be reflected in the fees for that application. And so when we look to review our development application fees, we should be looking at all of the associated costs with processing applications, whether they're planning related fees or engineering related fees, and ensuring that those applications are covering the costs, a reasonable proportion of the costs associated with processing the application. And I think that's as good as an answer as I can give you at this point in time without getting into discussions about service areas.
Follow up?
Yes, can you give us a timeline on that, please?
Cheryl?
Thank you. That work is with the Community Planning Division as part of the Development Services Modernization Project, but believe they're on it.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, that was for information. So 2:32, what do people think? Should we do a short break? Yeah, okay. Back at 2:40, please. Thank you. Watch them chewing in the boardroom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are live.
Thank you, and welcome back, everyone. So we will now turn to the next item on the agenda. Please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item R5, which is a report from the Community Planning Division regarding referral from Islands Trust bylaw amendments. There is a recommendation before you. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that the Islands Trust be informed that the interests of the Cowichan Valley Regional District are unaffected by Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee Draft Bylaw Number 530.
Okay, thank you. I see Director Yanni Donardo, were you moving that? And it's been seconded. Fine. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is R6, which is a report from the Water Management Division regarding budget amendment Cobble Hill Village Sewer. There is a three-part recommendation before you. Would you like me to read it?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that the 2022 budget for Function 812 Cobble Hill Village Sewer be amended to number 1, increase transfer from gas tax reserve phase 2 by $69,000. Number 2, increase transfer from capital reserve budget 803 Twin Cedars sewer system by $1,605. And number 3, increase capital engineering structures by $70,605.
Thank you very much. And I see, okay, was that moved and seconded, Director Wilson? And Director Yanni, okay. And I see Ms. Thompson has joined us as well.
Yeah. And if possible, after Ms. Thompson's finished, then I'd like to make a comment as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Thompson, do you have anything to say or just?
Yeah, thank you. I don't have a presentation or anything, but yeah, as the report states, this is just to proceed with design for this year for an expansion of the sewer main collection system for Cobble Hill Village Sewer, and then proceeding to construction next year, 2023.
Okay, thank you. So, Director Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, before we lose Mr. Dennison, finally, I know he's disappearing very soon. This particular sewer system has been a success from day one. There were a few problems that came up. They have been sorted out. So on behalf of Area C to Mr. Dennison and to the engineering department, including our new arrival, Miss Thompson there, thank you very much for what you've done, Mr. Dennison. Touch wood, there aren't any problems. And I would recommend to all you other directors, if you need a sewer system, take his private address. He'll sort it out for you. Thank you.
Great. I'm sure we all agree. Thank you, Mr. Dennison, for your many years of service. We don't get another chance. Okay, any further comments on this one? I forget, did we move it and say yes, we did, didn't we? Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So next item, please, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item R7, which is a report from the Water Management Division regarding Stalking Lake Dam replacement conceptual and preliminary design reports. There is one recommendation. Would you like me to approve it? Or sorry,
to read it.
to read it.
To read it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that option 2, new downstream dam in the Stalking Lake Dam remediation conceptual design attached to the Water Management Division's report of June 6, 2022 be approved.
Thank you. Okay. Is there a presentation on that one, Ms. Thompson, or anyone?
I don't have a presentation, but yeah, this is just to introduce 2 reports that Ladysmith had done by Ecora Engineering on the Stalking Lake Dam for options for remediation or replacement. And the town of Ladysmith and CBRD share the Stalking Lake Dam as part of the Saltaire water system and town of Ladysmith water system. And the preferred option that was decided upon between town of Ladysmith staff and CBRD staff was option 2. So that's the option that's being presented today. And this project will also be part of a request for a funding application. With the approval, the report for that will be at the committee of the whole meeting in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. Director Smith?
Thank you very much. I really am excited about this process. It has been ongoing, and I did have some questions. I've sent them to Mr. Boyson quite a while ago in regards to it, and I still don't really have the answers. So I'd like to go through my list, and maybe Ms. Thompson can answer them. So in the application that would be coming forward in the future, will that include the removal costs of the old dam?
Yeah, I see Mr. Boyson has popped up. I don't know which one would like to take question.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can respond to that. Yeah, through you to the director, the cost would be included. So that's sort of the whole cost. So part of the, just to add some more detail to it, is that the original option that was selected, there was this work was led by Ladysmith initially just to move these 2 reports forward through a grant, and so they were leading that part of the assessment. And so the details around, as we're going through the process, we're learning more details about the costs related to the projects, and that includes we're getting better information as we go forward about these types of costs as well, which is removal of the old dam as well. So everything's going to be included in the budget numbers that we will be sharing with you when we present the option for consideration for a grant.
So the next question, so I have a bit of a list. You'll have to just all bear with me. So you're indicating also that the road and the site access improvements costs will also be included in the grant application?
Boyson?
Through the chair, so I'd have to confirm to make sure as a part of that process, I believe. Are you referring to a list of questions you provided me that I answered a while ago?
Yeah, I do appreciate the answers that were for some of the questions, but not all of them were answered. So I'm just coming back to that list to review them. As you've indicated, you've received additional information. So the next, so you'll be getting back to us on the road and the site access improvements. The increased storage capacity licensing and the increased diversion licensing, is there any, of course, Saltaire would be looking for 50% or more in those licensings, as the town of Ladysmith has other water options. So I'm not sure where you're at with that. Did you have any information on that?
Yeah, Absolutely. So through the chair, I can just say that that the licensing component is not, so there will be an increase to the overall capacity of the dam, but the licensing application process will not be started until after this is completed. And so that's when we'll look at the breakdown. So the current provided in the report, some of the breakdown about the current water licenses, which is roughly 2/3 for the CVRD, 1/3 for the town of Ladysmith. And so we'll have that discussion and make sure we have a full discussion with the board before any water licenses and amendments to the water licenses are moved forward on.
Okay, going down my list, I was just wondering who owns the land that will be flooded with this increase in the 30 meters down?
Mr. Boyson? Sorry, we can't.
Sorry, I don't have the immediate answer to that one. Sorry, through the chair. I did pull up, can pull up my email that I had I got all my answers from previously from staff, but I'm not sure if Ms. Thompson has an answer for that one, or potentially Mr. Dennison might have the answer for that.
Not seeing any hands right now, Mr. Dennison.
I don't know.
No? Okay. So, Director Smith, how many more questions do you have? Are there 3 more? Okay.
Yeah,
Do you want to ask them all, group them all together, maybe?
Okay, so will the current CVRD and Town of Ladysmith interim management and co-licensing agreement transfer to the new dam?
Through the chair, then.
Since this is an interim agreement, would we have a more robust agreement put in place? And then we'll need to have a joint works agreement formalized for the dam. And then if there's any additional costs that are going to beyond the grant that would come to the Saltaire taxpayers, if there's any information on that, that would be appreciated. We always know that grants can say 100%, and then the next thing we know, something comes along that is additional that wasn't in the grant. So those are some of the things that.
Okay, thank you. So over to our staff team for that one. Those ones.
Yeah, well, so Mr. Dennison, I think, might have one of the answers there, but I would just speak overall to there is an existing agreement that lays out the ownership and also the operations for the dam as well. So that would carry over and continue on. If there's some changes that need to be made to that, that would be something we'd bring back to the board again for discussion to make sure it's been approved by the board. And sorry, for your other questions, I can't remember what the other ones were. Actually, could you remind me what they were?
Oh, okay. So you're indicating that the interim management and co-licensing agreement will transfer to the new dam. And then the other one was joint works agreement that we need to formalize that. I think there's always been a fair bit of CVRD talent headed up to the dam area to accomplish some things. So I don't think there's a formal agreement in place. So I think that would be part of it.
Well, the agreement right now identifies. Sorry, through the chair, the agreement identifies that the work is shared. But Mr. Dennison might have some more details about what's actually happening in practicality over the years, because he's seen what the actual experience is with. And Mr. Etherington has been involved in that a lot. But I think Mr. Dennison might know some more information on that.
Go ahead, Mr. Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it kind of varies based on the situation and the talents of the particular staff involved. I would say that we have a cooperative, understanding with ourselves and Ladysmith staff. So certain things Ladysmith kind of do. They do a lot more of the day-to-day monitoring and cleaning and things of that nature on the dam than we do. On the other hand, we have in Mr. Etherington a sometimes star performer, and in some occasions when they've had some difficulty getting ahead, he's charged in and helped them out, and got things going. And so I would say it depends on the situation. We've worked on it collectively, and I wouldn't say that, among CVRD staff, we have any sort of feeling that we're ending up with the bulk of it and it's not a fair arrangement. I think we've both put our efforts in as best we can to try and deal with the issues as they come up. Sometimes there's been some very complicated ones that have taken a big effort. We had a failed valve there a while ago, and that was really tricky, and took quite a while to sort out, but we did that collectively. So yeah, I think it's fine. I'm not anticipating that there would be a lot more work with the new dam. It'll be a fiberglass walled structure, and I think it'll probably hold up really well and not need a lot of attention, maybe even less than the existing one actually. So.
Okay.
The other question was, when the grant comes forward, if we could know of any items that would not be included in the grant that would then fall to either 50% Saltaire and Town of Ladysmith. I think that would be appreciated, because I know that with the filtration grant, I think we were a little surprised to have the additional upgrade of the hydro required, and that was a fair amount. I would like to say that I cannot thank the staff enough for all the amazing designs and crazy things that they've created to keep that dam going. As Mr. Dennison has indicated, there was a valve break up there, and he's just being a little bit shy on that, because it was way more work than, oh, well, we'll just go up and fix it. It required a lot, and they managed to keep the water flowing throughout that whole process. And boy, that's amazing. So kudos to the team, and kudos to especially Todd. We know the work that he puts in on that dam. So I do want to move the motion now that I've worked through my list a little bit there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to the final item. Ms. Harrison, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item R8 is a report from the General Manager, Land Use Services Department regarding development application referrals policy. And this was referred from the May 25th, 2022 board meeting. There is a recommendation. Would you like me to read it?
Well, please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that CVRD development application referrals policy be approved.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ms. Cheroff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there were three issues that arose at the last EASC meeting where this report and draft policy were presented. And that included discussion about including language around riparian areas in the consideration of applications, subdivision referrals, and then the consideration for the 50% threshold for minor versus major applications. And so the draft policy has been updated to include reference to riparian areas in the evaluation criteria under Part A of the policy. Number 8 of Part A of the policy has been updated to clarify, to make it really clear that when an application is received that is subject to Section 510 of the Local Government Act, and that's a section dealing with parkland requirements, and requires a decision of the board that application will be referred to the applicable Community Parks Advisory Commission by staff prior to going to the EASC. And then the third item around minor versus major applications was a little bit more tricky. There's actually very little, if any, sort of definition of what constitutes a minor variance in sort of local government local government setting, and I think that is because it's really up to the discretion to the individuals who are making that determination. And it's quite funny because we have boards of variance that can only approve minor variances, yet they're not defined in legislation. And we now more recently have legislation in the Local Government Act allowing delegation around development variance permits for variances that are minor, yet again, minor is not defined. And so staff have simply removed the reference to the 50% threshold and would rely on the criteria that are listed in the policy to determine what is minor versus major. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's up to the committee to determine, to make that determination before they make the decision on the application.
Okay, thank you. Director Acton.
Thank you. I have a few questions, but one of my questions is, if there's variance applications on the water, on the lake, which ones would end up at the APC, or would all of them?
So that's, yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, it's really up to the committee. And so it would really, I mean, again, we evaluate on a site-specific basis if we determine that, well, actually under this proposal, most development variance permit applications would go straight to the committee, and then the committee could either make the decision to approve it or deny it, or if the committee wanted to refer it to the APC at that time, they could do that. Or the director can refer the application to the APC prior to it going to committee. So that opportunity still exists. The intent of the policy was to identify or to try to have things come to you sooner so that you can make that decision sooner. We also have issues in some cases where we are asking applicants for information and they're not providing the information in a timely manner. And so we wait and we wait and wait for that information. And I think that if, you know, we're able to come to committee and to have the committee in some cases request that information, it can motivate the applicants to get that to us sooner. So really, this is really about getting things before you sooner, so they're not necessarily, you know, they're festering on the shelves because they're incomplete, or, you know, they're circulating out in the community and you haven't been properly briefed on the application.
Follow up, Director Acton?
Follow up. I keep asking this question because I think it'd be really beneficial for anything that's on the lake, particularly in Shawnigan Lake. I don't know what Cowichan Lake is like, but to actually just automatically go to the APC. The properties that you know, have been developed recently that didn't go to the APC, mostly I think because of COVID, we weren't sending them, are kind of out of the bounds of what are of the community plan, and the variances are granted, and I think it's really problematic, and I think wouldn't it just be more just better on our part to just send it to the APC automatically? It would be quicker, like the process would be quicker, and instead of when it comes to committee and directors are upset that, oh, it's just delaying, and it's like, no, actually it's creating better outcomes, I think, when it goes to the APC on these ones. So can we add that to the procedure?
Ms. Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Director Acton. Absolutely, if the committee wishes to have certain class of applications proceed directly to their APC, that would certainly be something you could incorporate into this policy. This is really about trying to streamline things. So if your intent is to always refer a certain type of application to your APC, and you have no problem with that application going to the APC before it comes to committee, then yes, absolutely, we can amend the policy to include language to that effect.
Okay, thank
Do
you.
you need a resolution for that? Because I would really, I think that would be a much better process if we, with those kinds of applications, went to the APC first.
I think you're not seconding, are you, Director Morrison? Okay, so why don't I've got Director Smith and then Morrison, and then we can come back for a resolution. Director Smith, please.
Thank you. So I have two items. I'm just wondering, there's still that gap between the CVRD staff sending out the letter to indicate to a director that there is an application and the director actually knowing what that application is for and having an opportunity to look at it. So you did say something about we're going to be briefed. So where is that in this process? We've jumped into our APCs and yet we haven't really clarified where we as directors sit in this. And I think we've been asking about this for a while. And that's, to me, really important to have that process fit. And where are we with that? And then I do have another question.
Okay, Ms. Trove.
So we are endeavoring to provide more information in the letters when the letters set out to open the file. We're still working on that process. We've made some adjustments to our website. So I think I sent out an email recently which shows that now our applications are broken out, not by application type, but by area. So you should be able to look at the list of applications that have come in for your specific area. And if you have questions or concerns about any of those, welcome to contact myself or Mr. Zermack in regards to those applications. And we would be happy to provide as much information as we can at that time to help determine whether or not, in fact, you'd want to do an early referral to an APC in any particular situation. Certainly, as Director Acton has suggested, it would make sense if there's a particular class of applications or particular circumstances like riparian incursions or variances that, we would want to be able to flag those and have a process for either sending them directly to committee or directly to APCs if they come in. So we want to be as consistent as we can, right? So there isn't a mixed bag. That's difficult. It's difficult for staff and for you, and it's difficult for applicants. So we want to try to be as consistent as we can.
So,
Director Smith?
Yes, Director Acton brought forward looking at anything that was on the shoreline for Shawnigan Lake to be referred to her APC. So would we be looking at this as each electoral area putting in a request at this time to say in area G, any marine, landslide hazard, or stream protection areas would automatically be sent to the area G APC. So are we working through that kind of a process or in this?
Mr. Chair, I think those are fair comments. I think, and we're referring to either applications for rezoning or variances in those particular areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we go to Director Morrison next and then come back if you have more? Director Morrison.
Thank you. And so I'm struggling a little bit with the what seems to be our direction being a little counter to where the province is wanting us to go. And I'm not saying we should be falling in line with what the province is sort of dictating that we do. But one of the aspects of the work that staff has produced that has given me a fair bit of comfort in this is that there's language that is included in our documents that say that when we're going to be referring items to APCs, it will have a certain amount of specificity towards the development permit or the DVP that it's being referred to speak to those specifically. And that's an important part of this process. And what I'm wanting to make sure we're not doing is referring an application that is, maybe a setback on a property that happens to be a waterfront on a creek or a lake, and the APC basically viewing every aspect of that lot as a reason to provide input. That runs completely counter to what the province is suggesting we do around the DAPR process, and to ensure that we're meeting timely deadlines, that we're doing the work that is required of us, and that we're not adding additional buffers or filters or layers to our processes. So can we get some clarification either from directors or staff that we're not making the process lengthier and more involved and more complicated by adding, additional automatic referrals? If there's intent and purpose and input required on a specific development permit or the likes, great, let's do that. But I don't want to see us making general referrals built into our process that is just opening up the door for comment on every aspect of what might be contained in a particular building lot. So can staff give me some comfort around that?
Mr. Ralph?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So ultimately, we want the process to be as short as it can for everybody. And so if your intent as directors is to have certain types of applications always go to your APC, then they should go to your APC first. If you're not really sure, it might be a one-off situation, then they should come to EASC first, or we have the discussion one-on-one, staff, director, and it's determined that way. And yes, it has to be, the referral has to be specific to what the APC is able to comment on, and that'll be in the scope of what is actually discretionary.
Thank you. So I have the directors Martman, Kuhn, and then back to Acton. Back to Martman.
Thank you. I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and landing on major and minor, and I look forward to how that all sort of comes out in the wash, or in more detail. What I'm interested in is, how do you plan to prepare new directors to be able to understand the process and get involved early on? Because to me, as a new director, this is pretty important information. And so are you building the education or a workshop around this for the future?
Mr. Ralph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Director Martman. Yes, absolutely. I think as part of the board orientation, I would hope that I would have enough time with incoming directors to look at both the legislation around planning and the different types of permits and approvals that the board can issue, and the processes. And an incoming board may want to do things differently. And so the nice thing about policy is that it's policy. It can be like a bylaw, right? It can be amended, it can be updated. We can could adopt something and see how it works. If it's not working for you, then you can get rid of it or you can change it.
Okay. All right. So I'll move to Director Kuhn.
Yes, I personally wouldn't be in favor of referring every kind of variance to an APC. I could see the necessity maybe for some of the directors that are concerned about that, if the variance affects the riparian area or the setback area, then maybe that could be a discussion at the APC. But other than that, if they just want to have a variance away from an access line or whatever, I can't see a reason to automatically refer that to the APC. So if there are directors that like to have that done, please exclude me. I'd like to have the choice myself, and I let's not make it more and more complicated. I mean, we're getting into that most of the time with discussions. Oh, let's add this, let's add this. And then in the end, we look back and say, well, why did we have to hire new staff? Well, hallelujah, there you go.
Thank you, Ms. Gerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to add that historically, variances have not been referred to APCs. So our prior development procedures bylaw was very clear that variance applications would come straight to the Electoral Area Services Committee, and that process was reliant on the legislated notice. So notice is sent to neighbors within a certain radius. So those people are well aware that an application is coming forward and there's an opportunity for the people that are most affected by the variance to provide input and comment. So, you know, moving to a process where we would have automatic referrals to an APC of variances is a bit different, but it may be warranted in certain situations, and it's ultimately you folks have to decide what you would like to do.
Okay, so good timing. Back to Director Acton.
Thank you. Well, I would like to see it happen. We had conversations today around riparian. We all agree it's important. We need to protect it. So if it was a variance inside a riparian, that's essentially a change in the OCP. You know, we have the OCP. It creates setbacks and everything, and that should go, in my mind, should go to the APC. They dive into it and they look at things just a little bit closer with that perspective of the community and how it, why it's there in the first place with the community's perspective. I think it's really worthwhile, and it's an area that I think we can improve on. And once you make errors in those kind of setbacks or variances in the riparian area, you don't get the opportunity to do it better again, really, 20 years, 40 years down the road. So it's super important. And I think we could easily, how many are there anyway? So a variance that is in the setback, then it should go to our APC. If it's in the riparian setback on a water course. Is that the right wording? But that's what I would like to see, and I would like to, if we need to, vote on that.
So are you proposing that would apply just to Area B, that all riparian would go automatically to your APC? Is that what you're thinking?
Riparian area on waterfront, or lakefront, or riverfront, or oceanfront, like however we can group it together, because I think the Coax Isla is also important too in Area B. So, and I know Director Smith has concerns about the ocean there. So I think if it's on riparian area in a water course, I'm sure that Ms. Charles can come up with the better wording, but it should be referred to the APC.
But that would only be for Area A or Area B, sorry.
Director Acton, is that your intention?
No, I'm saying we should do it in all areas. It's not okay, so we're moving into a future where we need to do things a little bit different. And
do it differently in your area, not in my area.
Okay, but staff wants it to be kind of generalized. We do have a harmonized OCP, and that's what I'm proposing.
Okay, so you can try that. You'll move that essentially. I'll see if you have a seconder. Do we have a seconder for that one? Director Nicholson seconding. Okay. Director Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering if we're talking about development permit areas and variances being put in those areas, because that's where our setbacks are. And one of the other areas that I think when it comes is the landslide hazard areas. And maybe Ms. Chernoff can clarify, would that be more of the building permit area, or would, like it be if there's a landslide hazard DP area and somebody's looking for a variance, is it that the building department permit area would be considering it before it became a development variance request?
No, so through you, Mr. Chair, the applications are processed through planning before they would go to building inspection. And so remember, the building inspectors have independent authority under the community charter they can get whatever reports they feel are necessary if it's in a landslide hazard area or if they feel it's in a landslide hazard area. So you're talking about applications for variances in a development permit area. And so in what the regime that we've created at the CBRD is that the variance request comes to the committee and then to the board for decision. And then if there's a development permit that's required, that's been delegated to staff, but the DVP has to be decided by the committee or the board.
So are we then asking those to go to the APC, those variances in those development permit areas?
So under the proposed policy, those applications would come to you directly. And you would have the opportunity to either make a decision at that time to advance it to the board for approval or denial, or to refer to the APC. So the question I think you're grappling with is, should there be an earlier referral to the APC automatically in those situations prior to those reports coming to committee? And so what my suggestion is that you need to, as a committee, come to an agreement on how you want to handle those, whether you want them to come, generally speaking, to you directly or to the APC first. And there's always the opportunity to just refer it to the APC first, right? As an electoral area director, you can do that. We're just looking for a general process, right? That we can advise applicants of, so that we can say, generally, this is the process. And then from time to time, it might change, but generally, this is the process we try to follow. This is the policy that's been established, just for that certainty.
Right, okay. So let's just, before we continue discussion, Ms. Harrison, could you just read what you have for the resolution for clarity? Are we?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I need clarification on that as well.
Okay, so Director Acton.
Well, I'm happy to go just area B, but I think we're making a mistake by just doing area B. But so it's up to the committee, essentially. But I would like to see all variances that are in the development permit. It's not called the development permit area. All development permits that are requesting variances in a riparian area on Shawnigan Lake be referred to the APC before coming to the committee.
Okay, so that's more specific to Shawnigan only. And are you still
it doesn't sound like people want it, so.
Right, okay, so Director Nicholson, are you seconding that? I
think I seconded something
yes,
else.
Okay.
So there is a different motion on the floor.
Okay, procedurally, we might be getting a little. I'm going to go ahead, Ms. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I've just received some notes from our recording secretary, Jennifer Hughes. And she has that development variance permits in riparian areas or waterfront lands be referred to the applicable electoral area APC for review and comment. That's what's on the floor right now.
Okay, good. So we'll deal with that one first. That's been moved and seconded to have Director Martman and then Nicholson.
Thanks. So I gather that this one speaks to the whole CVRD electoral areas, and I would not be in favor of this. And I'll give an example why. Recently, we had an example of a riparian setback on the waterfront, and it came to committee first, and then the committee referred it to the our APC. Our APC looked at it and said, well, we don't do much around DPAs. What's this in front of us? And so it took them some time to sort of wrap their head around what are they actually being asked. But in the meantime, the applicant had decided that they removed actually most of the encroachment on the repairing area. So when it went to the APC, they actually were just looking at a porch over the repairing area rather than the foundation of the building. So the process actually worked quite well because the APC looked at that encroachment of the deck and said, yeah, well, we can see the issues here. This is what our concerns are, the asset of the applicant. So the process worked very well going through to the EASC, going to refer to APC, and the APC also, I think, brought something to my attention that I thought was important for this committee to hear, and that is they're volunteers and their time's important. And, they want to know that it's important that it's been referred to them from the director or through a committee. So I think that was something I learned. Thank you.
Thank you. So Director Nicholson.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I actually have no problem with it coming to the Electoral Area Services Committee first. I recognize that sometimes it would be more expedient to go directly to the APC, but I think what would be important in the staff reports is that there's always an option there to remind us that we could send it to the APC, because I don't want, I really value the APC input, and I certainly don't want them to be forgotten in the process on things that they really should be looking at from the community's point of view.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Director Martman, because you're fairly new in this, and yet I was a few years in, and I referred something to my APC, and I kind of got some flack for it. And you're absolutely right. There's things that are very good use of our APC's time, and I think to have an automatic, send it off to them first isn't appropriate use of their time. I think staff have designed a system that we're going to get a letter, we're going to get it come to us in a early draft form, and if there's a director that wants to see everything go to their APC, it's at that point they say, send it to the APC, send it to the APC, send it to the APC. But for the most part, those of us that can make decisions as a group, that want to see things move forward, have that ability as a group to do that, and individual APCs or individual applications at the behest of the director can go that extra step to their APC. So I won't support the resolution on the floor, and I will support the process that staff have designed for us. It's essentially reflecting what we've asked them to do. Thank you.
Okay, let's be brief. I think we know Director Kuhn and then Nicholson to close.
Yeah, just to get back to Sarah's comment. Yes, you're right, Sarah. There are not many applications anyway that would apply to that. So then if there are not many, then why make a general rule? I mean, if there are, let's say, 2 a year or 3 a year, you can determine yourself, okay, send them to the APC. That's easy enough. Why have a general rule for everybody then? It doesn't make sense.
Okay, Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I would just like to comment on Director Morrison's comment. If it is just up to the director of the area to decide whether it goes to the APC or not, then it doesn't need to go to the whole committee. We could just have the planner contact the director and they could decide, and that would be faster. But staff are recommending that it come to the committee, so I am presuming that other people can weigh in on whether they think it would be appropriate to get the community's input on an application based on the information provided. Would that be correct or not, Ms. Charles?
Charles?
Yes, I mean, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So again, I guess I go back to this idea of things coming to you sooner. We have had some situations, and it's about administrative fairness to a certain extent, where we've had applications that have been come in and then they've gone out to committee, or sorry, to an APC, and they've been circulating and sort of decided in the community before actually coming to this committee, right? And so we want to make sure that there's a fair process, but we also want to make sure that there's a framework around how we handle referrals. And yes, you could, as directors, decide on every single application that comes through in your area. Does it, do you want it to go to committee or to your APC first? And that's not efficient, right? So it's just trying to provide some general rules around what we think should go to committee first versus going to an APC first.
Okay, thank you. So I think it's time to call the question on this one that we have on the floor right now. So all in favor? Opposed? Motion fails. Okay, so there is a recommendation there. Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion on the staff recommendation? Seeing none, I'd like to call the question on that. Then all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Harrison, we'll go to the next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is question period, and we have no applicants.
Okay, thank you.
The next item after that would be to move into closed session. So the recommendation before you would be that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with the Community Charter, Part 4, Division 3, Section 90, subsections 1F.
Okay, thank you. That was moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, very good. We'll see everyone back in 10 minutes. I do have to leave Director Acton